Good evening, everyone. I will call our school district of Brown Deer Board meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. Verification of public notice. Our meeting has been publicly noticed. Verification of a quorum. We do have 5 of our 7 board members present at this time. I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda. So moved. All right, thank you very much. Ms. Felita Daniels Ashley, second. I second. Thank you very much, Ms. Macon. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, ayes have it. The motion carries. Our vision for the district is to provide a rigorous education that empowers our students to confidently navigate in our ever-changing world. And our mission is through the lens of excellence, equity, and engagement. We are dedicated to empowering every student with the essential skills to build a foundation for lifelong learning. All right, up first, we have our business office report. So, Mr. Clement.
Good evening, members of the board. Just a couple of items that I shared with you on my business office update. First, we do have a new director of food service in the district. Tate Flom has joined us. He was previously the assistant food service director in Mequon Thiensville. Came very highly recommended. I ran into his former business manager last week at the Wildville conference, and she was happy for him, but disappointed for the district. She said we got a really good one. So very excited to have Tate as part of the team. His background actually in nutrition and originally was even like sports nutrition. So one of the things he did in Mequon Thiensville, which he wants to replicate here, was actually working with certain athletic teams and having kind of meetings with them to help them understand, you know, what kind of how food can impact their performance in that particular sport. You know, getting ready for practice, getting ready for games, things like that. So that's one of the things he wants to continue to do to bring with us. So he is now on board. Molly Janata, who's the regional director for Aramark. You've met her obviously several times when we've done presentation to the board. She continues to assist Tate as he transitions into the role. And we all met a couple weeks ago after he had a chance to settle in a little bit to talk about the program. And one of the things that we discussed, because that was part of our RFP process, was trying to enhance student participation and student feedback in the program. So we're actually working with the principals at the middle and the high school to develop 2 small focus groups to that are lunch users right now, to start with that group and have Tate sit down with them and discuss, you know, what are the things you like, what are the things you don't like, whether it's from a food quality or food options or service delivery, things like that. So we're going to start to get some feedback, and then he'll report back. And if anything is, you know, immediately actionable, we'll certainly look at that. Otherwise, if there are other enhancements we can work on down the road, we will do that as well. So that was an important part. I wanted to make sure we were providing our students a voice in the food service program. Update on our audit and annual report. I feel much better than I did a year ago at this point. We have not filed the annual report yet. As I mentioned in the document, that we are waiting on DPI for one claim process we're going through, working with them, which can impact both Fund 10 and Fund 27 for one final adjustment we may need to make. So we're working with them on that. And as soon as that is approved, everything else is done from the auditor standpoint. Our cash, which is one of our findings last year, is all reconciled. Everything's perfect. So the auditor, we're all just kind of on hold, waiting for that final step to be completed. And then we'll be able to file and certify the annual report, and the auditors can finish the financial statement. So we'll be in very good shape.
So what's our drop dead date for that filing?
Well, the annual report is, we're technically late, but again, we're working with DPI, so they know we're late or why it is. And so as soon as that happens, we'll file that. To have the audit for DPI to have the final audit is December 15th. So we won't have any trouble meeting that unless for some reason this issue drags out longer than we anticipate. But we're hoping within the next week or so we should have resolution. So, and I can let the board know when we do that. So it'll be, you know, within a day of getting the final numbers, we can make the adjustments at Skyward, do the claim, get all that taken care of, submit the report. Auditors will know the adjustments, and then they'll be able to go on their way. So we are just waiting for that. And any other questions on that piece? Because I know that's a sensitive topic right now with schools and audits and reporting. So Okay, and then just two other quick updates, a couple of other quick updates. One is our cash flow line of credit we talked about a couple weeks ago. I am working with both Quarles and Tri-City to finalize that process. Both have paperwork and they're starting to connect. So I'm anticipating we will have all that ready to go for the October 22nd board meeting for the board to approve a $500,000 line of credit for in the need, the unlikely need that we need something at our low point in November. And then the COPS grant, just to let you know, I am still awaiting approval of that grant award modification that we talked about when we approved the Verkada camera purchase. It's going through, it's on the second layer of, I don't know how many layers, but it's moving along. I did see that somebody did something to it on October 1st, so there was some movement there. I can't tell what it was. I have reached out to our grant contact at the Department of Justice, and they said it's moving along. They don't have an estimate. They are behind to some extent, as you might expect, but and I also know that September is the end of the federal fiscal year, so September 30th, so there may have been some delays going on as we approach that. So hopefully that will speed up and we should get final word. I've been holding off on doing the big claim until I obviously know that we have access to all that money for the Verkada. And then just finally, I just wanted to mention that I was at the Waswell Fall Conference last week, a couple of interesting sessions, and I'll be bringing information later on about some of those things, but we did went to topics on compensation, risk control, using artificial intelligence in the business office, and facility planning. So a couple other things that will help try to bring some things back and introduce some ideas here in the district shortly. So but it was a nice conference to participate in. And that is the end of my update that I expected.
I have a question for the COPS grant. Is there a possibility that they won't approve the adjustment?
Well, theoretically, yes. I mean, we assumed that because we already have a certain chunk of money for the cameras, that was part of it already. There was another large chunk for the video recorders that would have been needed under the old camera system. So when we, hopefully explain to them, because it was related to the camera part. So I feel pretty confident they should be able to understand that, well, now that we switched to a cloud-based system, that's no longer needed. So we can use that as part of that camera purchase. The questionable piece, I think, was the extra $20,000 for the tabletop exercises for the reunification piece that we feel we can do differently, but we'll see if they do deny that part, then we'll have to just focus with the funds that we have. But that would still be about $100,000 in grant money between those first two pieces.
Is that COPS grant coming out of DOJ or DBI?
DOJ, it's a federal grant. Whole different claiming system, whole different set of all sorts of other fun stuff going on. So yeah. And a whole different group of people to work with. So. Alright.
Okay, so let's move on then to our approval of new hires.
We have one new hire this evening. It was a last minute addition, so on your stapled copy, you don't see it, but I gave you a second copy of the it should be that loose list. Right to your left.
Okay.
So there's a Marison Kelly, special education teacher, will be joining us at the elementary school.
I'll make a motion to approve the hiring of Marison Kelly as a SPED teacher in the elementary school effective 10/14/24.
I'll second. Okay. All right. So it's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries 6-0. Approval of resignations.
We do have one resignation. Kim Robbins, our early childhood special education teacher, has offered her resignation effective October 11th. This would be pending receipt of liquidated damages.
Okay, and is she one of our new hires?
No, she joined us a year and a half ago, I think.
All right, can we get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the resignation of Kim Robbins as elementary school special education teacher effective October 11th, 2024, pending receipt of liquidated damages.
All right, I'll second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. So we would like to welcome our new hire as well as wish Kim Robbins success on her future endeavors, and as it always says, once a falcon, always a falcon. All right, moving on to our 24-25 budget update.
Share my screen here. So we have completed the third Friday count. That was on the 5th of September. And we have filed our paperwork with DPI. So we know what our count is. There are other parts of the count that we are still determining the open enrollment out and independent charter schools and through some things like that. But the main part of our revenue is pretty close. So I want to just kind of step through again. Some of these will shift a little bit, but because it is different than what we had discussed earlier in the year and certainly at the annual meeting, which I mentioned, of course, things can change. So first of all, just to show you, this is our head count. These are the students in our seats across the district, showing you our last 5 years, plus then we have the actual numbers. And then the last column is what we had originally projected. So what I had done, we had used the Baird cohort survival model, which kind of looks trends over multiple years, and you can weight certain years differently. It's very challenging to do the enrollment piece here in this district, and it tends to fluctuate a little bit. So I tried to be conservative and keeping it, relatively flat. And then we also then added 40 some open enrollment seats through our process last January. So 1670 did not seem to be that far off, but obviously we didn't hit that mark. We actually ended up at 1610 as our official count. So that's in addition, that includes the open enrollment seats. So we did have a net loss of students from one year to the next. And if you look down, or I should say a net loss. Yes, we did have a net loss of about 20 students from last year. And obviously less within the projection. So if you kind of look down, you can see several of the grade levels of the elementary school were down a little bit. Freshmen at the high school were down a little bit. Certainly much lower than we had projected and much lower than it had been previously. So kind of interesting just to kind of watch how these numbers have trended. But so we're at 1,610 for our count. Any questions on the general enrollments?
Well, I mean, just looking at the numbers, I find interesting, for instance, if you look at that 9th grade line, last year we had 117. This year you have 116, that's only one, but you projected 141, which would be a difference of 25.
Right, but
How does that increased number come?
you look at the 131, that you look at 8th grade,
Yeah.
where last year we had 131 8th graders.
So that was the year after.
That was the year before, yeah. So you have to kind of look diagonally up to
Right.
see
I
what
see
the
what you're
transition
saying,
would have
yes.
been.
Wow,
And
so drop off when they come into high school, they didn't go.
right, and you've seen other years where, 8th to 9th grade went from, now, there were some years earlier in the chart where we were purposely putting in open enrollment students in freshman year. We had those 30 seats we were doing for a while, but that stopped. But even then you saw, 124 to 145, so it's not unusual to see a jump, freshman year is an opportunity where if you're, at a private parochial school or K-8 situation where this might be where you jump into the high school level, but it's also apparently a place where else you can jump out of the district and go and potentially go somewhere else. So we are going to continue to look at our open enrollment situations, kind of see if there are patterns in that. But again, the data tells you, there are certain areas where we have to kind of take a harder look as to what happens in those transitions from one grade to the next. But it just does add to the challenge of trying to project enrollment. So I think we'll have a more lengthy conversation next year as to what we think, how we want to approach that count. We've been lucky the last few years where it's been relatively stable. This year we were obviously a little bit off in what we had projected, so.
So do we know if we had a drop in applications or if they just applied for grades that maybe we didn't have openings for?
Well, open enrollment, because this includes all the resident students and the ones that we allowed in through open enrollment in. So that's what this number is. This isn't open enrollment out yet. That's a little later.
No, I mean for those coming in.
Well, for those coming in, we were a little under what we had projected. We obviously may have had applicants. We don't keep waiting lists for grades that we don't have seats. So we don't necessarily know how many are applying. We don't keep track of that necessarily. We do the we do automatic rejection letters for people who do apply. So I guess we do know the numbers that apply. I don't have that information in front of me to tell you that we had 0 third grade seats. We had, 50 children apply. Again, the challenge is you're looking at, and that's the other thing, and I can share this with the board because we have some new board members, but we did a couple years ago, we did that that enrollment study where I was looking at September and January counts. Because we'd always, it always grows. So we always have this September count where it's going to be a certain number. And then usually we add 20 to 30 students between, December or September and January. The problem is that January was never really indicative of what happens the following September. It seems to either just drop off or you'd think that, okay, the numbers are growing, then is it just going to drop a little bit and continue to grow, or is there some pattern? And over the last 5 or 6 years that we were looking at, there just wasn't a significant pattern that you could say whatever's happening in January. We just know we will continue to add students as the year goes on. But what happens next September is kind of anybody's guess. It just doesn't seem to be consistency.
Do we have any idea of where our incoming freshmen went?
We'd have to go and again look to see which of those students, like you look at the 131 students, we'd have to see where they, who didn't come back, how many of those students, because obviously some of the 116 students that we have as freshmen, some are new. So how many we actually lost, that might be a good grade to actually do a in-depth analysis to say, here were the students we had, how many actually came forward, how many left, do we know, did they leave through open enrollment, did they just kind of disappear? If they go to private school, we don't necessarily, we won't know that, but they'll just kind of go off the grid a little bit, or if they homeschool or move to another community, another state, it's a different situation.
I would think you'd know that through records requests.
Well, again, it depends on if they request records. We are sometimes delayed in, we usually will try to wait to withdraw students until we get record requests, but sometimes those schools are delayed in requesting them as well. So doesn't always happen as quickly as we would like.
Seem to think and remember that Ellen was doing some sort of tracking of some of those individuals who were choosing or electing not to come back to Brown Deer. Is that still happening?
Well, she had reached out to open enrollment families last year to kind of get some sense of what their choices or why they're making that decision. I don't think it's very likely that if parents are uprooting their students and they're going to another district, they've made that choice, and a likelihood of a phone call or something is going to change their minds. I don't know. I think the larger issue that we've been discussing is what are those narratives that people are using to make those decisions, and how can we correct that going forward? And how can we, if we do have, I'm just using as an example, if there is a concern about the 8th to 9th grade transition, what are we doing with our 8th grade families now to help them understand what programs we offer as 9th grade and give them opportunities to experience what it is to be in high school in Brown Deer, and show them the activities, clubs, sports that are all available, and make sure that they're all aware of that, before the window opens for them to start talking about open enrolling to another district.
I think that's great, Kevin, but the purpose of the survey was just so we can kind of glean and get some information from the parents as to why they made a decision to enroll their children out for 9th grade. So what it would do is kind of be that data point that would marry the information that you're talking about. So we know this is how we need to market based on the fact that they've said that they left because of XYZ things. And then just so we have, kind of a base, that data point.
I think we're saying the same, and that was what we're using that data for.
Right,
And I think we were gonna beef up our marketing too.
Yeah.
Marketing of that the 7th and 8th grade. If you look at some other districts, they spend a whole lot of time, they start shopping those young students at about 6th grade when they're knowing that particularly if they're in the middle school, right? Just making sure they're getting in front of them and what they have for them, right? Just to run out an idea of so that we are just not waiting until they leave, but actually making it attractive or making it difficult for them to make the decision to leave the district. Particularly if they matriculated up, since, kindergarten. Right?
Right.
It's kind of sad to see, students leave and we poured into the foundation and then somebody else gets the credit.
Right, and some of it, some of it is people relocating, so it's whether it's, they may, and I think the bigger issue, and some of that could be based on schools, they decide to move to a different community, I mean, it's hard to get all of that sort of data.
I don't get it.
One of the things though one of the projects I am going to be working on over the next few, like month or so, is I actually have started collecting all of the open enrollment data out for the last 13 years. Basically looked at like if a 4K went, through the entire system, and see where we have students entering and leaving from an open enrollment standpoint. Just to determine, number one is when we do have students that are actively open enrolling out, the year before, where were they? Were they here
Yeah.
or were they in Milwaukee? Did they go to Milwaukee?
And
They moved to Brown Deer and they're still open enrolling in Milwaukee, where they haven't even had the opportunity to experience Brown Deer. And again, what grades are those? And, obviously at a high school level, it doesn't surprise me that someone with a freshman that moved into Brown Deer may still want to open enroll back to Milwaukee to be with the kids that, their children grew up with, or a particular school that may offer something that, we don't have because they have some of those specialty schools as well. So I think there's more digging that we have to do, and I think it's just understanding, what are the reasons that families are making those decisions. I mean, some of it is things that we can control and some of it are things that we won't be able to.
Yeah.
But doing the best we can just to make sure that we're doing our best to keep as many families as we can.
I just wanted to, I just wanted to offer to the report that Ms. Shimmons did. I met with all of the leaders already and we started to discuss some of the stuff that's going on that we found out from parents. And also I'm finding out a lot of that same information. I've met with the PTC and I've met with the PAC as well. And so they're giving the communications coordinator and I met with them just last week, Monday. And so we're trying to get information from them about as to choices that people are making. And that's why Katie and I have been working so closely and trying to increase our presence on social media, just so, because that's a different way to tell our story about what's going on, the great things that are going on in the district as well. So just wanted you to know that we're trying to tackle this from a different area as well.
Ms. Munns has a comment there, and the thing she just said that apologies if it's not allowed, ignore it if it is. Last year, 8th grade parent meeting at high school was super late in the school year. That meeting about high school needs to happen in early January before open enrollment.
Yeah.
Great information.
It is, and so it's stuff like that, because she shared stuff like that, but we're already behind the 8 ball with one of our other competitors, because they've already opened up their high school enrollment there. And so, we're competing with other entities and other programs too that we just don't offer in the district as well.
I don't think it just needs to be a leadership, like Gerald and all his coaches and teams make people stay, and theater programs, that's the thing that makes kids say, no, mommy, I don't want to leave.
Social.
So Kevin, you said that work is happening this year, because I know we've talked about this for a while.
Well, we haven't analyzed the open enrollment piece as closely as I'm going to do it this year to really, dig into it. It is just to understand, because I think narratively, I can't say definitively where the kids are going or whether they're leaving. Like, are they leaving us completely? Are they moving to those districts? Like, where is this happening? Or again, how many students never attended here because they lived in a different community before they came here and open enrolled out? So just to understand how many kids, the difference between the number of kids who are here and open enroll out and kids that have never been here and open enroll out. So we'll have that data shortly.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Any other questions on the headcount piece? And we touch on open enrollment here quick, but we can go through that. So jumping ahead then a little bit for open enrollment in. As I mentioned, we did open up a number of additional seats this year. We had a number of students, 14 students were going to drop off because they graduated as seniors. So we're going to have 38 seats next year, and we opened up an additional 40 some to have a total of 86. We did not fill all of the seats, or it was possibly that we didn't fill all the seats, or that some of the other students disappeared. Maybe they were open enrolling in and then they decided to do something else. So we have we have actually, for the count purposes, we have 79. Because we had one open enrollment student who started after the count date. So we really do have 80 this year, but 79 are listed in the count. So we're down 6 in total from the previous year. And you can see how that's distributed.
Will you show up on your game?
They will be in our January. So, and again, open enrollment in, that gets pulled out of this number when they do the revenue limit calculation. So it doesn't really matter whether they're here or not at this point. But from a revenue standpoint, we do get, or not from a revenue limit, but we do get money from the other districts. That's part of that interdistrict transfer that we'll get, based on the 80 students versus 70.
What's that per people?
It's $8,600, I believe, for this year. And then special education is 13,400. Right. And so I did mention in here that with these numbers, we are estimating, again, based on the students we have, and the ones that are listed as special education, adding all that up, we are looking at revenue of about $736,000 for open enrollment in. And then open enrollment out. And again, this is another one that's always a challenge because we are at the mercy of districts reporting. And I've had years where I look at the third Friday count and I say, wow, we only have 180 kids. Oh, that's wonderful. And then 3 weeks later, we have 230. And so the problem is that anything that happens now will be won't count for revenue, but it's going to count for the expense. And then, so I have to count for that. And then we do get to, potentially, if they're here all year, we do get to mark them as not counted and they may get added into our revenue limit next year, but we have to kind of go through this year. So as of the count date, so, and actually as of the count date and as of the filing date. So when we filed the report on October 2nd, we had 221 open enrollment out students. And it's down slightly from what we had last year. I think we had 229, or see that in just a second. 232 is what we had. So 221, I just rolled everybody over. So I had 246. So that's not bad. And the 246 number I used was what we had at the end of the year, because that's where the expense is going to run into. So I had to I wanted to make sure we were safe there. So, so again, we have the 221. The numbers don't add up because for some reason in Opal, the portal that DPI uses, there's 3 students that don't have a grade assigned to them. So I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're going to disappear or not, but for right now, they're listed as X. So I have to reach out to them and figure out where they are. So, but it is right now it's 221 overall. With the total, then looking at the number of regular education and special education students, the expense that is estimated is about $2.1 million, which is about what we spent this year or this past year on open enrollment for our expense. I currently had $2.5 million budgeted. That was more on that 250 kind of number. So I'm going to watch over the next few days and weeks and just kind of see if the trend starts to tick up. I obviously would like to leave some pad in there because again, if students open enroll throughout the year, they will continue to be added to that list and there will be an expense tied to them. So I'm hoping that it won't be too many, but I might be able to dial that 2.5 down to say 2.4. We'll see, just to give ourselves some pad for the remainder of the school year. So that will help reduce our overall expenses, which will help kind of shrink the deficit that we're looking at. Any questions on open enrollment out? And then the next step is to figure out our resident membership FTE. So this includes, so we take our head count, subtract out the open enrollment in, we add in the open enrollment out, and then we do some adjustments to a few things. So we have our prorated numbers for our early childhood and K-4 students. We look at our summer school minutes that we do based on this past summer. And we had a total of 7 FTE based on our numbers. That was down 1 FTE from last year, which was 8. And then we also have, last year we had 2 FTE for independent charter schools. New students who attend the newer independent charter schools are actually paid through the revenue limit, through the tax levy and that, and then the transfer, not through a different aid package that the state handled. So they show up on a revenue limit. So I don't know what that number is yet. I'm putting in 2 right now because that's what last year. It could be more, it could be less. The amount that we would send to the charter school is a little over $11,000. and it's very confusing how DPI puts different dollar values on different kinds of students, but so we would, for every student, we would be getting about 13,000 to be sending about 11. So we have a slight positive on that, but we'd still a good chunk of the money would go away to the independent charter school. When you add all of that up, we have our current estimate for the 24-25 school year. Our September FT is 1,724, and then you take that and average it with the 2 previous years, and you get to 1,744. Because that was a drop of 2 FTE from the previous year, DPI provides what's known as a one-time declining enrollment exemption. So they basically let you keep the 2 FTE this year, but next year that money will go away. It gives you 1 year basically to address the declining enrollment situation. So we would have an additional 25 or almost $26,000 that's included in our revenue limit authority. Make up for that. Okay.
I know you just came off of the WASBO conference and many of the districts are in attendance as well. The other district, I'm just curious, the other districts in the decline. That's the state.
Generally, I mean, yes, most districts are experiencing a decline in enrollment. It's the birth rates, have gone down, and there are certain districts that are growing, certain districts, are not. So we've been fortunate the last 3 or 4 years. We've had this little kind of bubble that's kind of brought us up. I don't know, what will happen. Again, the Brown Deer community is unique, I think. We don't have a lot of, new construction coming in that we're building neighborhoods and things like that we're actually seeing growth. But we do have a lot of turnover in housing, and then what happens with that turnover? Who replaces my retired neighbors when they decide to sell, and are they families with young children, and then do the children attend here, or do they go somewhere else? So it's kind of interesting. And then I know the village will be having conversations about other developments that'll be going on soon. And so what does that mean? And if they're approved, how does that impact us as well? So so then, now that we have our updated count, we take our base revenue, or we multiply our revenue across the board, and you get our declining enrollment exemption of 25,788. We have some prior year open enrollment. This would be the situation for students when they're not counted in September because they show up late. And then we have, right now I'm using this estimate for the private school voucher exemptions, then that number may change, and whatever it changes to, there'll be a expense that will match that. But right now we're anticipating our total revenue limit with exemptions at $23,755,000. Your annual meeting budget was $24,050,000, so it's about $300,000. So we are about 297 lower than projected from the annual meeting budget. And again, what that number settles at will be impacted by that private school number, which again, I won't know until next Tuesday. So next Tuesday is the big day for us. But with that reduction, and the other important piece is that we also don't know what our state aid will be, our general equalized aid. We have our July 1st estimate, which I'm using at just under $16 million. There were some adjustments that are going to be made because of some reporting issues with NPS last year that we all kind of took a hit last year because of some errors. Now it's going to end up coming back to us to some extent. I don't know to what extent. We also underspent though as a district. When our big surplus, positive side is we have the surplus, but it means that we didn't spend as much, so our shared costs are down. So that it may end up being a wash for us a little bit. So we'll see how that. So I haven't changed that at all yet. We'll again find that out next Tuesday. And again, the exempt computer aid, that only went up slightly because of a TIP district closing. But the other piece that will kind of help us out this year. So I had mentioned previously that so every year we receive from the Department of Revenue, you receive a notification of an estimate for state aid for exempt personal property. So every community, I don't know how they figured out, but there's property that is tax exempt. Had the state received money for it, this is the amount of money we would have received. So the state kind of backfills that personal property. We get about $60,000 a year, and that's what we've received for many, many years. With the previous budget and the cost sharing or the cost sharing that they were doing with municipalities, one of the pieces of that was that there's additional money now available for school districts. So we got a second letter this year, which provided us with $165,000 in additional exempt personal property aid. When I presented this to you at the annual meeting budget, I assumed, and most people assumed, that this was all kind of the same bucket. And so the number under exempt personal property, it included both of those things. So it actually lowered our taxes. It lowered our Fund 10 levy a little bit. EPI has now provided updated guidance, and they're saying that at least this year, the way they read the law and the way they're going to do it is that this original number that we had will be under the revenue limit, but the other amount of money, the $165,000, will be outside of the revenue limit. So that's going to be $165,000 of additional money we can spend. So that will help offset about half of our deficit that we're creating from our budget. So that was kind of a nice addition. So we're not really that far off overall. So again, when it all settles out, we're looking at about $17 million in state aid. Right now, our allowable revenue based on, again, where we are at this exact moment is about $6.6 million, 6.68, which is a little lower than what we had projected at the annual meeting. Again, we only use the Fund 10 levy. So if we then take that number and add in what we would need to get to our $11,111,000, what our tax levy was last year, our Fund 39 or referendum debt levy goes to $4.4 million, which is about $1.5 million potentially to the fees in additional debt. So that will be our target. And again, what that number looks like, it may be higher or lower depending on what the, like I said, what the private school vouchers come in at and how equalization aid fits in. That'll help determine what our actual Fund 10 levy is. So that will happen. So we're targeting, we obviously presented that idea of a flat levy to the taxpayers at the annual meeting. It received overwhelming support, unanimous support with the levy that we had at that time. So I believe the board will probably want to continue to move forward with that plan. So whatever the situation that develops in the next week, we will target an $11,111,000 tax levy for the 24-25 school year.
Yeah.
So overall budget impact then, just kind of as the wrap up, again, that we're about $300,000 lower than we projected in the annual meeting budget. It is still more than the revenue limit part is more than last year. But again, we are losing all that federal aid, which is part of this calculation. So we will have less money to spend, but from a revenue limit standpoint, it does go up a little bit. So we're about $300,000 lower, but we do have this $165,000 extra of personal property aid. So that'll, it cuts about half of that away. So we're looking at our additional shortfall of it being about $135,000. I'm still working through expenses. As you know, we just hired a new staff member today. We have a couple more offers out there, trying to finalize that. We also bought a truck that we're taking delivery on tomorrow. So things that weren't necessarily in the budget. So I'm still working through those computations to tell you exactly where we'll be. I still believe we will be under $1 million of a deficit. But how much or where we'll be exactly, I'm not 100% sure yet. And we will continue to ride the budget all year long. If our history tells us that, as I said this many times, like I always feel a little ill when I present the budget and I think like, oh, is it enough? Am I tight? I feel really tight. I feel like it's going to be, we can run into trouble. Hopefully we'll continue to run positively and we'll just naturally carve a few $100,000 out of that deficit through the way we normally operate, because every year we've been doing that anyway, unplanned. So we'll continue to look at that. So again, targeting, it'll still be under $1 million again with the $1.3 million surplus last year. It still puts us in a better position than we were at the end of the previous budget year. So the administrator, we just talked about it to decide, like, do we want to do anything about this? And other than just kind of watching as we go and maybe being cautious about some other expenses that we take on over the course of the year, we're not looking at making any significant budget changes. I'm not looking to do it across the board cut right now. We want to kind of let it ride. And because I do, again, think we need to kind of show our community this is what it costs to run the district, doing what we feel like we need to do. So we have the resources to do it, and I would rather do that than prematurely cut some things that would impact students before we know that we would need to do. So this is just an update. Obviously, there's nothing to vote on, but this is kind of give you a little bit of the first few pages of what the report will look like with some adjustments that I presented to you in 2 weeks to do the final budget and tax levy approval. Any question?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for just keeping your eyes and ears and just watching, right? Because it is difficult times right now, right? Like it's just, I'm not sure what, we know what this year is gonna bring, but not sure what, following year is gonna bring, but it's just really, really important that we're just watching things and managing things to the greatest extent possible, right?
Being a good steward of funds.
The funds.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think what we're gonna learn a lot about ourselves this year as to what the district really kind of needs, like I said, to operate, and I think it'll just be part of our dialogue over the next 6 to 9 months as we start talking, it's funny, like, I'm still finishing the 23-24 school year. We're doing this, and as soon as this gets done, I start looking at 25-26. And so having those conversations about, well, we have to make choices next year, what does that look like? And what do we feel like we have to prioritize? Or are there different ways we want to approach things? Like, do we want to look at open enrollment differently? Do we want to look at other things, what are we comfortable with from an enrollment standpoint for our district? Do we want to, what do we think we want to, how do we want to plan so that we can have a better budget? I mean, the challenge is, yes, I can always undercut and make our enrollment numbers much lower and then be happy when we have 50 more students. The challenge is that if you go in with that, thinking that's what it's going to be, and then you have to hire teachers in September, that's a challenge as well. So I want to try to be as accurate as possible, or at least be in a situation where we feel like we've invested the dollars in the right place, and we'll kind of deal with those ramifications. Again, we're not too far over that we can't work through that.
I have a quick question. Okay, I recently saw that MPS lost a substantial amount of money for their Head Start program. And as a result of them losing all of this money, now they have to push their Head Start students out to other places. So some will go into, I think it's a K-3 programming, but they have 19 schools where if you multiply average of 17 kids in 19 classes, that's a big amount of students that are moving. And then I think it was like 19 or 20 schools that they were keeping, mostly on the south side. Of those schools that they were keeping on the south side, they have to come up with funds from somewhere else because they lost all of the money through the Head Start program. Okay, so my story or my question is, do we have some contingency money so that if we lose money for any funding, let's say for instance, for the early childhood program, that we won't feel a big strain because of the fact that we lost a substantial amount of money? I mean, I would think that would be very devastating to any district, particularly MPS, but I would hate for it to happen.
Well, I don't know all the details on why the money was lost in MPS. Obviously, we do receive a considerable amount of federal funding, and, through either food service or title or IDEA, it's well over, $1 million. If all that money went away, that would obviously be a huge hit for us. But I think, thus far, we haven't had any issues with the audits, and when we go through and our claims are proper and everything is correct. And so unless our student population would change dramatically, I think the money will still be in those same kind of allotments. And it's more of like, because I don't want to besmirch anybody, but I think if I remember correctly, it was more of some mismanagement and some other things that actually caused it to disappear.
Well, it was,
Well, let's not get into specifics.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it was, right,
because this is something that
we're careful, I'm just saying we're
cannot
careful.
be controlled because it was supposedly due to security issues. So it's how do you, so for me, looking at that, specifics are important in this particular instance, because if you are expecting, and I have the paperwork here somewhere, it was a substantial amount of money that they lost, that I'm not really sure that they can really project having lost that money, because it was supposedly because there was some someone deemed that there were some security issues as far as maltreatment of kids or whatever. So how do you project, okay, they're a bigger school district than we are, and we just have the 3 schools. The 3 schools. Let's say they're looking at 20, 30, 39 schools or whatever it was. How do you, you try to manage 39 schools, but I'm just saying for us, we only have 3 schools. But if we're losing money because somehow or another, let's say for instance, one of the kids was put out, because in the situation it said a couple of kids have been left outside or something on their own, or somebody wasn't on a playground. those are little, I mean, not just, they're important, but those are things that can occur that can cause us to lose money. And here it is, you think you have all of the safeguards in place, and then you lose this money. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
Just-
we try to be very careful, obviously, with, obviously the CLC grant as an example has very, stringent requirements, and we had a review last year and they saw what we were doing and was very positive. Food service, same thing, they come in and they check us out and make sure we're doing the right things and don't have any issues. So we will continue to do
issues,
that,
that's
right,
it.
right. We will continue to do that as best we can. Obviously, things can happen, but I think that we've just tried to be very, very cognizant, and certainly maybe the size of our district actually makes it a little easier to manage. I don't know, but we're aware. The last thing I want to do is have work to the board that all of our title funding has been removed. So purpose one or the other.
So we have
we're trying to be very.
no issues. I mean, and that's something we should, applaud ourselves for, or even put it out there, things are good,
I'm trying to be very careful. I mean, and very, very cautious, but like I said, it can happen, thing can happen in any situation, and you don't wanna, we're just gonna continue to be careful and do what we need to do.
So that was good information to know that there are no issues. We don't have anything that's not, that we can protect. But also, it would be nice if we figured out a way to have some surplus money in the event that we do have any.
Well, I mean, I think our biggest challenge will be the enrollment piece and how do we see our district managing the next, 5 years as an example, and as we look at, again, what the general enrollment trends are within the state, what our community is going through, whether, we have additional housing as part of it, whether or not, we also have to recognize the fact that we have a new private school opening up not too far away from us in a year. Does that have an impact on us or not? I don't know. So there's just gonna be a lot of external factors, and certainly a large drop off in students would be a financial impact, and we'd have to address. And then again, it's deciding what can we afford to do, or where do we have to get the additional funds to be able to support the programs that we want to continue to support. And or how do we get the number of kids to the point where we feel like that's where we need to be in order to support the programs we want to support. So there'll be a lot of, kind of programmatic, strategic discussions about the direction of the district over the next several months and years, no doubt. So
Okay, I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer. I just wanted to kind
I
of,
come in with this nice
Right.
budget report for you.
I just wanted to, because I remember a couple of years ago, the CDC or CLC or something grant, we lost some money and we had to figure out where we were gonna get that money from to kind of keep that programming going. And that's fine.
That is a recurring grant that we're in year 3 of 5. It's possible that it would not get renewed after 5 years. We have some, we know you have at least 3 years left on that. The COPS grant goes away, other things have a life that, that whether they're replaced by something else or, whatever happens, we look at that. But I don't know that we're in a situation where we have, one single thing disappearing would devastate us necessarily. We're still trying to spread it around among a number of different programs that we hopefully all doing correctly. So
Thank you.
other questions, then I'll see you in 2 weeks for the budget. I hope.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Goodman. Up next is parent-teacher conferences.
That's me. Tonight, I wanted to inform and possibly ask for forgiveness if I did this in the incorrect manner, the board of a modification to the upcoming parent-teacher conferences schedule. Originally, the 24-25 calendar only had 2 days that were listed for parent-teacher conferences. The information being shared this evening moves conferences from 2 days to 3 days, adding Tuesday, October 15th, to the current schedule. Adding Tuesday allows parents another conference day option, and the scheduled dates and times are featured on the agenda before you, and I can answer any questions you may have. So it really was just done to add another day for conferences and shorten the half day, which was Thursday. It was gonna run from to 7:30. And by adding Tuesday, we just made 3 different available chunks for parents as opposed to just two.
So then I guess if any parents need to come earlier, they would have the virtual
They
option.
have that virtual option on the Thursday, because that is still a day of school, is just a half day.
Right, any questions? Well, thank you very much. Next, engaged in innovative staff, so discussion of approval for request for proposal for snow removal.
Good evening, board. How are you? Wonderful.
You.
Doing fantastic, thanks. This year we went up for, an RFP for snow removal for our wonderful district, and, I was able to get, a total of 4 bids to our district for snow removal this year. Compared to the last 2 times where I've gotten 1 company or no companies and then struggled around to find a company to do our snow. This year we had 4, which I'm very pleased about. After doing some research and some referral calls and doing some background checks on some of the companies that we did, I've come to the conclusion of asking the board to approve that we hire a company called Cast Iron Property Services LLC for a duration of 3 years.
So my question is, when do they offer services versus, the purchase of a new truck, right? With the attached plow, right?
Correct.
That were purchased. So when do these folks kick in versus being able to use the truck?
Our truck we use all the time. That's our truck. We do snow removal whenever it's necessary. As a matter of fact, we're here for emergency purposes with our truck in case one of their trucks breaks down. We also do our own snow plow with the truck as well to keep up, the weekends and days and things like that so that people don't fall and slip. So we do use our plow on a regular basis. So the snow company would be actually coming in as of November 1st. And they would be basically contracted until April. So if we were to get any major snow between November 1st and April, they would be the company that would come in, do the plowing of all the parking lots and the salting. Before or after that, it's on us. Now, we do have the option of, hey, it's April 15th and this is Wisconsin and we got, 6 inches of snow that dumped on us. I can call them and they say, okay, here's our rate of service for this one snowfall. We'll help you out.
Can I ask a question?
So basically, they give us a flat rate for
Correct,
the year, but if they use us, we use them 20 times or 1 time, we're paying the same.
correct.
It's not per.
Nope, it is flat rate.
Yeah, that's good.
It is one.
They're gonna
flat
hold the
rate.
rate for 3 years.
Huh?
Is it the same rate for 3 years then?
That is very true.
So I think kind of going back to what Meredith was saying, like, what's the point of us paying for the truck with the plow?
Because we use the plow for other areas that they're contracted for. And plus, when they leave, we do keep some of the upkeep on the areas. So like the back area here, we use the plow truck back here. We use the plow truck for back behind the school. And we also use the plow truck to keep open the areas in front of the driveways and things like that. So we do use the plow truck.
Just from my perspective, it's unfortunate that we gotta use the plow truck and pay this much for service.
Well, the
I don't think
unfortunate
this
problem
service
is that this is much more of an animal than just one plow truck. If we had three plow trucks, we would need
We
this.
don't have 5 trucks.
But we don't have 3 plow trucks and the capability of doing that.
We really would be using them in the big snow, correct?
Correct.
Because the one plow truck is not gonna be able to move masses of.
But
snow.
that's my whole point though, for
Mhm.
this kind of money, we should be having them for everything.
They will be here for 99% of everything, correct?
Matt, do they give us any, like, it's snowed the nighttime, we'll be here before school starts? Because
Yes.
okay, good.
They
Because
have
I
to
grew up
have the, they
frustration,
have
they
to
come
have the
at 10,
grounds
that
cleared,
doesn't
they
help.
have to have the grounds cleared by 6 AM.
Okay.
And
They come back across the day or?
yes, they will come back across the day, correct?
I think part of it is that because, you know, they do have other clients as well, is that that's where we, with our truck, have the ability to go in and do some touch up if we need to, and again, keep it safe, not just wait for them to come back, you know. The issue obviously is, it is the equipment and it's staffing, and it's being able to have people to be available at 2 to 3 in the morning to start this process, or depending on when the snowfall happens, you know, if it's a early morning piece. As Matt said, these companies, and we're on the list to be designed that we will be done before our employees start showing up for work, so that our lots will be plowed. And there's a significant amount of space between the, you know, the main parking lot that you all see here, the elementary school with the playground, the parking lot behind the middle school where the staff parks. And then you add in, you know, the fire lane path and other things that we have to address the sidewalks, you know, around the block. There's just a lot in that we're kind of both doing, but they're here to do the majority of the asphalt related to the driveways.
So to build on what Lisa's question was, of the 4 who applied, did any of them have a per snow rate, or were they all flat rates?
There was 2 companies that had the per snow rate, which was yeah, which was, hang on, let me, give me 1 second here.
And of those.
It was
other
lawn and snow and Servet landscaping. They had personal fall. So they had their initial costs, and then they had personal fall after they came back.
And their rates over
And their
the
rates
years
were
went up.
actually higher.
This is the only company that's stayed flat over the 3. And I think you used lawn and snow last year, correct?
Yes, correct.
What were their rates? Compared to-
Their rates for this contract that they were looking for were.
76, 77, 78
Okay, there you go.
for the pre-season.
So that was their hourly rate, increased $1 each year?
$1,000 for their seasonal price, where this one was 72, I think.
This is 72.
Yep, this is
This is
72,
76.
no matter how much salt they put down and no matter how much snow they push.
I mean, for me, it's a necessary evil. I mean, you have to have it, but I think that there should be a plan where we tell them where to push the snow. Because I've been up here for conferences when they don't make sense of where they push the snow and they take out a lot of the parking lot. We're already strapped our parking spots the way it is, and when they push snow this way and now over here, you know, there has to be a way it goes one way, so it cuts off the least amount of spots possible, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. And that was part of the problem that we had with these past years.
Oh, yeah.
We were running out of room and yeah.
I mean, in my brain, it'll make sense go to the back, you know, one side, having something in the middle, it really is a big clog. That's just my own 2 cents, but, I mean, I don't live far, and anytime there's an event here, I just walk, because there's nowhere to park. So for me, it's frustrating, so I'm sure for other parents equally as frustrating, so when we cut down spots, then there's less, and makes no one happy.
Any other questions? Okay, Then I would like to get a motion for this item.
Make a motion to approve Cast Iron Property Services LLC for district snow removal services for the 24 through 27 school years at an annual cost not to exceed $72,757.
Right, is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor with aye?
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, board.
Next is accommodations to recognize servant leaders.
So October 6th through the 12th is Wisconsin School Board Week. And this special week is a time to build awareness and provide an understanding of the vital functions elected boards of education members play in our communities. The school district of Brown Deer appreciates our Board of Education members and the dedication to serve our students, staff, families, and communities. We are sharing our pride in our members this week, and I would like to read into record following. Village of Brown Deer Proclamation. Proclamation declaring October 6th through October 12th, 2024 as Wisconsin School Board Week in the Village of Brown Deer. Whereas the School District of Brown Deer recognizes the importance of public education in our community, and whereas the School District of Brown Deer appreciates the vital role played by the local school board, which establishes policies to ensure an efficient, effective school system. And whereas the School District of Brown Deer school board members serve as a voice that enables our community to preserve local management and control of our public schools. And whereas the School District of Brown Deer school board members are charged with representing our local education interests in state and federal governments and ensuring compliance with state and federal law. And whereas the School District of Brown Deer school board members selflessly devote their knowledge, time, and talent as advocates for our school children and community's future. Whereas the School District of Brown Deer's local school board members are strong advocates for public education and responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the School District of Brown Deer students, staff, and administrators and family recognizes and salutes the members of the School District of Brown Deer Board of Education by proclaiming October 6th through the 12th, 2024 as Wisconsin School Board Week, signed by Village of Brown Deer President Wanda Montgomery and countersigned by Carmen Brusman, Village Clerk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank you too for the beautiful video.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Really nice.
that's what we need for the 8th grade parents, something like that. Like, oh,
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is what you get when you get to high school.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And that, wait a minute, this is my new song too.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, my goodness.
Super Bowl. Thank you all so very much. That's great. I so appreciate it for that acknowledgement. All right, I was like, what is that?
Got your own little commemorative copy of it.
Very cool. Okay. Anyone else want to speak on it? Yeah. All right, so let's move on then to the Engage Board and Community to Lead. Is that Mr. Clement or?
No, what you have in front of you, I believe, are the first readings of a number of policies that myself and Ms. Ross met with Neola. They span a little bit of everything. A lot of them are updates, new language that Neola would like for us to add to our policy. So we're asking for a motion to approve the first readings of all of the policies that are before you.
Questions from the board?
just have one question when I was reading through that about the alternative to propulsion and new policy. And I was correct. It is the PL 5610.03 about midway down and I just kept thinking about the workshop, the in-service that was conducted. And I'm just wondering if some of the items that were mentioned in that particular policy kind of mirror some of the stuff that we were framed in. Yeah,
I believe that they were. And I have to really look to just see if there's anything that differs from the PD that
yeah,
Ms. Hanneman gave
Yes.
to us as opposed to what we currently have in policy. But a lot of them are technical changes,
yeah.
just
I noticed that.
updating, language so that we're meeting with what other districts have out there. So we can review that policy
Yeah,
just to make sure.
Yeah, that was just the only one that stuck out. The other ones were slight modifications.
Anything else? I do have a point of clarity for the meetings one, so the very first one. So is that basically saying that we can do virtual if we agree ahead of time?
Virtual attendance by board members along with relating drafted notices. So I would assume that if we went to a virtual meeting, we just have to notice it, that we were going to be virtual, so that if the public wanted to attend, virtually, they had that option of doing so.
I do also believe that one is one to where we could do things virtually, except for going to closed session, but we can do our meetings virtually again, as Dr. Cotton already stated, as long as we post it and individuals can be able to come into the Zoom meeting and it's public. So otherwise, we actually can hold Zoom meetings or whatever for our board meetings.
All right, if there are no other questions, then I'd like to entertain a motion.
P.D. Robinson, I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of the Neola policy review, including all of the policy provisions as listed.
All right, in a second.
I'll second.
All right, Dr. Beadle, yes. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And then we'll have our second reading in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Or, okay. Yes. All right, very good. Over here, so I can make sure that's his name. Okay, so our next item on the agenda is adjournment.
I'll second.
Nobody motioned, so we gonna say we
I
got.
know. I'm keeping it light, guys. How you doing?
So we got a motion by Dr. Beadle. Is there a second? Second. All right. All in favor? Second. I did. Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will call our meeting adjourned at 7:10 p.m. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We will reconvene in a couple of weeks.
All right.